to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast, a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and a member of Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics. So, if you've listened to the Patreon, you might know this, but it's just me today. I will be going solo. Unfortunately, Dave and Evan were unable to make it this week, so you'll be hanging with me this episode, and I hope you have a good time. I miss you, Evan and Dave. Can't wait to see you next week, though. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about 3 movies today, but before I get into that, I want to tell you about our Patreon bonus episode. If you're a member for $5 a month, you get access, and I talked about the 2 new horror films, Y2K, more horror, sci-fi comedy with horror elements, and Dead Male on Shudder. And so if you're a patron, go check it out, and if you're not, maybe consider joining. Also want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs. Heather, you rock. Thank you so much. Okay, let's talk about this week's movies. We're going to be talking about Sinners, The Wedding Banquet, and The Ugly Stepsister. So I'm going to kick things off talking about The Ugly Stepsister, which is a Norwegian fairy tale horror. It's written and directed by Emily Blichfeldt, and it stars Lee Myron and Thea Sophie Lockness. And this has made the festival circuit run. It was at Sundance. It was at Overlook. It's been at a ton of film festivals. So it's coming out in theaters today, April 18th. And let me give you the synopsis from the press release. A sinister twist on the classic Cinderella story, The Ugly Stepsister follows Elvira as she prepares to earn the prince's affection at any cost. In a kingdom where beauty is a brutal business, Elvira will compete with the beautiful and enchanting Agnes to become the belle of the ball. So, yeah, it is a retelling of Cinderella with many familiar elements. Also, in many ways, or in some ways, more true to the original fairy tale, which are the fairy tales are often very grim and disturbing. And it also has some of its own twists on that story. So Elvira and her mother and her sister, Alma, are traveling to her new stepfather to be's house with his daughter Agnes, but it opens with this love scene. It's like bathed in red and pink lighting, and Elvira's reading poems which are written by the prince, and she wants to marry him. So that's how it opens, and then it cuts to them traveling to her stepfather to be's house, and her mother and stepfather marry. At the dinner table, her stepfather throws cake at her and he's laughing, which is kind of weird. But then he dies unexpectedly and he spits blood up, and we hear screams from his death. And Elvira tries to comfort Agnes, but Agnes is having none of it. And she's like, how dare you compare your grief of her father dying to her grief? And she says, like, my father would never have let people like you into our lives if it wasn't for the money. And she's like, what money? And so there isn't money. And which unfolds and throughout the film is Elvira's mother is like cutting costs drastically. So Elvira is, she looks into the mirror because her mother is scoffing about how it's hard to find a rich man to marry, and talking about how she's like aging with 2 hopeless daughters. And she's very critical of Elvira's appearance. We see like a close up of Elvira squeezing a pimple. And there's a lot of close ups and a lot of gory things about beauty treatments in this film. So, much like in the original Cinderella, the girls are invited to a ball. And then they're also both sent to like this finishing school where young women learn posture and they learn how to dance and so on and so forth. And Elvira's mother takes her to a surgeon where he says he can, quote, tame it. And you see a maid wiping blood off of the floor in the next room. And then Elvira braces herself, and it looks like it's a torture device, and she screams as the doctor chisels into her nose, breaking it. Her mother is like smiling ghoulishly, and Elvira's sister Alma is horrified, of course. And then Elvira wears this golden device on her nose after her nose job, which is shown in a lot of the stills and promotional materials for the film. And so at dinner, Elvira has to eat like broth while everyone else has like a robust meal because she's repeatedly told that she's fat, which is just more absurdities and ridiculousness about this, body shaming and, conforming to these absurd beauty standards. And meanwhile, Agnes is a super fiery Cinderella, and she's, pissed off because she wants to know when there's going to be a funeral for her father because he's like rotting away in the next room, and you hear like flies buzzing, and it's just absurd. And Agnes's stepmother says that, oh, well, you don't need your dresses, so Elvira's going to wear them. And Elvira is a really great dancer, but the dance instructor won't pick her for like this choreographed dance that's going to happen at the ball because she says that she has wasted talent because she's not pretty. And then the woman who runs this like finishing school for girls, she says she feels bad, and she's like, I'm going to help you out. And, you're changing your outside to fit what you know is on the inside, and she calls her brave. And she talks about it's what's inside that counts, which is just ridiculous considering she's doing all of these things to change her outward appearance. And she gives her a locket, and inside the locket is a tapeworm. And so she can take the tapeworm and then she'll lose weight. And Alma is like, this is stupid. And she said she'd rather die than do this. And Alma sees through all the bullshit, which is great. And then you see Agnes, and she's in love with a stable boy, and they kiss, but she's like, I've got to marry the prince because she needs the money. And Elvira's taking a walk in the woods, and she comes upon the prince unexpectedly, and he's with his friends, and they're talking really grossly about women and sex. And even despite that, Elvira is still like entranced from them. So 3 months later, we see Elvira's nose being unveiled, and it's like this big, big deal. And then we see her back at the surgeon's office, and he talks about or you see a sign that says beauty is pain, which of course is, something you hear a lot, or we have heard a lot in society. And he also talks about how he could improve her breasts because, of course, there's always something to improve. It's always this one-upping, which is just ridiculous. And then we come to the most disturbing scene. It is so grotesque. It is a scene that has haunted me. I saw this film at the Boston Underground Film Festival, one of the best film festivals, by the way. I love it. And I have been thinking about this. This scene in particular has haunted me for weeks after seeing it. And it is like straight out of a giallo. There's an extreme close-up on Elvira's eye, and you see a needle, and he sews into her flesh for her eyelashes so she can have these fake eyelashes sewn in, and like we poke through the flesh, and it is so disgusting and horrifying. And you also can see the camera from Elvira's POV, like through her eyes with the lower lash being sewn in the foreground in the bottom of the frame. It's great how it's done, but it is so disgusting and so disturbing. I mean, in addition to all of the other disturbing things thematically, like it's just so viscerally grotesque in what's happening. And then that night, she bandages over her bloody eyes, and we see the tapeworm moving around her stomach. Like, ugh, it's just awful. So because of all the things that she's doing, the dance teacher in class eventually chooses Elvira to be the lead in the group. Because Agnes is home mourning her father because she's just like, she doesn't give a shit anymore. And we see like Agnes is just beside herself. Like we see her sleeping on her father's rotting corpse. We see worms on her dress. And as this is happening, she's like bathed in this golden light, and we see the spirit of her deceased mother and silkworms repair her dress, which had been ripped by Elvira because they both were going to go to the ball, and Elvira was furious that Agnes was still going to go. And so her deceased mother tells her that shoes are in the pocket and her coach will turn to a pumpkin at midnight. Kind of, all the stereotypical things. Meanwhile, Elvira has been losing her hair, and she ends up putting on a wig. And her mother tells her that she's beautiful, but of course she's turned from what started as a nice person in the beginning. And not only was she nice to Agnes, but she was also nice to like people who worked at the house. But now, of course, she's turned into an ugly, mean person, which is, of course, not a subtle message. And then we finally get to the ball and all the pomp and ceremony of that, and she's dancing with the prince. But she gets sick, so she has to run off, and she vomits worm eggs in another room, which is great. And her mother sees this and screams at her and tells her to get back, and slaps her and tells her to get back out and dance with other men. And then the prince also had kind of lost interest because who should appear at the ball but a masked Cinderella, aka Agnes, and he's just enraptured with her. And so, of course, at midnight, she runs off because everything's going to, disappear. And just like the story, she leaves behind a shoe. He wants to find who fits the shoe. And so, in more grotesquerie, Elvira decides to chop off her toes with a cleaver, and that you still see the toes like hinged, like hanging on by a thread or like a tendon. Oh, yeah. It's pretty gory. It's just, yeah. And so then Alma, so she's done all this, and when Elvira like passes out, and also her mother indicates that she's chopped off the wrong foot, and so her mother chops off her other foot, even though Alma tells her to like let her be. And Elvira awakens and she races to get out of bed and downstairs because the prince is there. And she falls down the stairs. She knocks a tooth out and she breaks her nose. And you see some of her sewn in eyelashes. A little piece is like loose. So she is now, after all of this work, she has become, not the beauty that she had aspired to be and did all of this horrific enduring of. And so Alma gives her the antidote for the tapeworm and she vomits that out. And that's a really grotesque scene too, where she just has ropes and ropes of the worm coming out and just spilling out of her open mouth. But then, Alma steals jewelry from their mother. And because Alma, has had enough of this bullshit. And she's like, let's get the fuck out of here. And so, Agnes she goes off with the prince, marries the prince, and Alma and Elvira ride away and leaving. So That is the film. It's intense, and I liked it. I was never bored. It was really captivating. Um, it has a really lush production design and absolutely gorgeous costumes. The look of it is just so beautiful. I loved that, and everything that happens in the film is incredibly awful, of course, because it's how society reinforces beauty standards, and which is not different than our society, of course. It's a really gruesome fairy tale, and like I said, it's in some ways like the foot chopping, closer to the original fairy tale of Cinderella. But I do wish it had subverted more and delved a bit more deeply into beauty standards. Um, and not that it didn't, but somehow it just I don't know. I guess I was still yearning for more. I can't help but compare it to my favorite Cinderella retelling, which is Ever After, the Drew Barrymore starring film, which is just wonderful and lovely, and I adore it. And this is kind of like a mashup of Ever After and The Substance. I've seen a few reviews compare it to The Substance, which of course, how can you not? Because that Coralie Farjat's The Substance was such a commanding film and so visceral and gory and grotesque in so many ways and so striking. And it was one of my favorite films of last year. And it's hard not to think about that film and how the two are kind of in conversation with each other, have so many similarities, and in the lengths that women will go to destroy their bodies, change their bodies in order to fit this this idea, this abstract idea of what a woman's body and face should look like in order to be accepted by society, desired by men. And we're told explicitly and implicitly that we'll be fulfilled when we achieve these things. And it's all bullshit, of course. And it's something that I think we as women struggle with. And I know I certainly do, because it's like part of me is like, my body, my choice, and it's like anyone who wants to do anything with their body, I am for. I'm and especially when we're talking about any kind of care, that's gender affirming care, and I want people to have what they need and they want. And of course, it also relates to bodily autonomy in like reproductive justice issues. And so I want people to be able to do what they want to do and express themselves how they want to express themselves. Simultaneously, I feel, why do we feel this need, this compulsion to conform our bodies and our faces to these absurd standards that are always shifting and changing? And who are we doing it for? Are we really doing it for ourselves? Are we doing it for society? And in The Ugly Stepsister, it's a little bit different because, of course, it's a matter of status and money and being married off. So it's of course a horror version of this, but it's a bit different. But still those same standards are there, and those same pressures. And in some ways, you can argue it's worse now just because of social media and the omnipresence of cameras and social media. We're constantly looking at ourselves, and it's hard not to compare yourself to others, to celebrities. So yeah, but I really liked this. I think this is a striking film, and whew, I will be thinking about that eye scene. That will forever haunt me. It's something else. All right, so the next film is The Wedding Banquet, which is a queer comedy drama. It's a remake of Ang Lee's iconic film, and this is written and directed by Andrew Ahn, and it's also written by James Schamus, and it stars Kelly Marie Tran, Lily Gladstone, Bowen Yang, Han Ji Chan, Joan Chen, and Yoon Yu Jung. So here is the synopsis from the press release. Angela and her partner Lee have been unlucky with their IVF treatments, but can't afford to pay for another round. Meanwhile, their friend Min, the closeted scion of a multinational corporate empire, has plenty of family money, but a soon-to-expire student visa. When his commitment-phobic boyfriend Chris rejects his proposal, Min makes the offer to Angela instead, a green card marriage in exchange for funding Lee's IVF. But their plans to quietly elope are upended when Min's skeptical grandmother flies in from Korea unannounced, insisting on an all-out wedding extravaganza. So yeah, that is a very complete synopsis, obviously. And Angela and Lee live in Lee's house that was gifted to her by her father. And just like Lily Gladstone is Indigenous, Lee is also Indigenous. And then in the garage / guest house, I guess, like converted garage, that's where Min and Chris live. And Angela and Chris have been friends since Angela is played by Kelly Marie Tran, Lee is played by Lily Gladstone, Chris is played by Bowen Yang, and Min is played by Han Shi-chan. And Chris and Angela have been friends since college, and now all four of them are friends, and they're super, super close. They go out together, they celebrate together, and yeah, it's really sweet. And the film opens with Angela and Lee at this award ceremony for it's a queer award ceremony, not for either of them, even though Lee is an activist who works at a queer rights organization. No, it is for Angela's mom, played by Joan Chen, for being an ally, because she does a lot with PFLAG. And Angela, who is a scientist studying eco-friendly worms and like how they eat certain plastics, she and her mother have kind of a fractured relationship, even though her mom's like super supportive, because Angela feels like her mom just makes her being queer all about herself. And as you later learn in the film, her mom was not initially supportive and then kind of waltzed back into her life, and then kind of did like, she kind of went the other way and became the most extra. But yeah, just she feels like she centers herself. Angela feels like her mom centers herself a lot, which is extremely frustrating. But Angela doesn't like to confront anyone about anything. And as Lee says, she just likes to simmer. So the two of them have tried twice for either IVF treatments, but it hasn't happened. And Lee is the one who has been trying to get pregnant. And then meanwhile, you have Min, who is got this incredibly wealthy family. And you have Chris, he is a birder who does tours, but he's on a kind of a sabbatical from his dissertation on queer theory. And he and Min have been together for 5 years, but he just will not commit. And he commits, of course, to their relationship, but he won't commit to, like, he doesn't want to get married. And so Min is really hurt when Chris rejects his proposal, because Chris doesn't, it's clear as the movie unfolds, he doesn't think, and he actually says this, so there's no inferring this, he says this explicitly, he doesn't think he's good enough for Min. And he's worried about blowing up Min's life, and he will lose money because of him, because Min's grandfather is homophobic and would not give him his money and inheritance if he was, or the fact that if he knew he was gay. So they plan to have this green card marriage. And Min feels like, oh, I'll just tell my grandmother and that will be sufficient, because his grandmother's in Korea. He's like, I'll just tell her over video chat and it'll be great and it'll be fine and everything will work out, and I can give Angela and Lee the money and they'll have what they need so they can have their third round of IVF treatments. And yeah, but that doesn't quite pan out, because his grandmother arrives unexpectedly, and because she's suspicious, thinking that Angela is after the family money, even though Min says she's not. But she's like, no, I need to see for myself. And so she shows up, and then very quickly the ruse unravels, because the grandmother is extremely observant and sees what's going on. And so they come clean to her almost immediately. And so she's like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And she said, we'll have the ceremony and we'll take lots of pictures. And so that will satisfy your grandfather because he'll see that it's in the papers. So that'll be enough. And so this is what they're going to do. So they go through the ceremonies and, they do all of the traditional things and they take lots of photos and they have the traditional foods and all of that. But as this is all happening, you have Chris and Min, having difficulties over Chris's inability to commit completely. And then you also have another challenge thrown into this because Angela and Lee are talking, and Angela says, maybe we should take the money and travel instead of having a child. She's like, we could just spend the time, the two of us, we could travel abroad. It would be great. And Lee is heartbroken of this. She's devastated because she's like, well, wait a minute. No, I want a family. I want to have a child. And, I thought that's what she wanted too. And so they have this fight, and Angela and Chris get drunk. And something that had been mentioned early on is that not only did Angela and Chris, not only were they friends, but they hooked up when they were at college before either of them had come out. And so they're having a good old time, drinking it up. And then next day, they find they are both naked in bed with each other. And of course, you can see where this is going, or at least I did, that Angel's the one who's going to get pregnant. And she does. She gets pregnant because at the ceremony, the wedding ceremony, she pukes on Min as he's like hoisting her on his back as part of the traditional ceremony. So anyway, she's pregnant, and then all of this causes, challenges. But yeah, eventually it all works out, and Min and Angela are at the courthouse. They're going to get married, and then Chris shows up in a Chinese dragon costume, and he doesn't even really say anything, but Min recognizes the public gesture it is, and he's like, yes, I'll marry you. And so they get married instead at the courthouse, and then Angela and Lee reconcile, and it cuts ahead, and we see all four of them. They now have two babies, and all four of them are taking care of the babies when they wake up at night, and it's extremely lovely and extremely sweet. And I should also mention, before we get to this point, Min has an extremely tender conversation with his grandmother, and she said that she always knew he was different, and she sent him away to protect him from his grandfather. And she talks about how she thought she was doing the right thing, but she realized that what he always needed was family, which he's found here with his found family, which so many of us queer people do. And she says, I wish I could have married whom I wanted. And she said that she wasn't in love with his grandfather, and she wanted him to be able to marry and have the life that he chose. And she talked about how, like I said, she knew he was different, and it's very clear that she knew he was gay. And it's really sweet in this conversation, and also through talking with Angela's mom, and they have some tender moments together. And yeah, Min's grandmother, like, by asking questions of the various people, she learns about Min's life, and she learns about how to be more accepting to Min and how to really truly give him the love he needs and to be there for him. And so, yeah, this is an incredibly sweet film with such a fantastic cast. It's such a great cast. And Kelly Marie Tran should be a bigger star. Obviously, she was in Star Wars, and she has had lead roles like in the new horror film Control Freak, but she really should be a bigger star. She's great here. Lily Gladstone is, I adore Lily Gladstone. They're my favorite, one of my absolute favorite actors. She's excellent in every single role. A powerhouse of an actor who just always delivers a masterclass in subtleties. I really love and treasure um, their chemistry and the relationship that Angela and Lee have. Their relationship just feels so real. And Angela tells Lee she loves her in this really sweet and tender way of softly repeating, like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And it's so nice, and it just made me swoon. It's just so great. Um, Also, this is also lovely too. Kelly Marie Tran said that being in the wedding banquet helped her come out as queer, which is just great. Um, and Bowen Yang and Han Ji Chan are a very sweet couple. Um, and Joan Chen is wonderful. Yoon Yu Jung, who was excellent in Minari, where she won the Academy Award for her performance, is just so spectacular here. And each of the characters shows a different way of reacting to your child or your grandchild coming out as queer. And these two women really anchor and elevate the film with their gravitas and just the subtleties in their performances. Um, Andrew Ahn, who is a gay filmmaker, also directed Spa Night, which is a great film, and Fire Island, which I also really enjoyed. The film gets stronger as it goes along and as it gets more tender and emotional and kind of pulls away from the comedic moments, at least for me. I enjoyed those tender emotional moments far more than the comedy. I think the writing is the weakest part of the film, though, because far too often it relies on telling rather than showing with lots of exposition that I think could have been more integrated and unfolded a bit more organically. But when this film works, it really works. The ending resolves the characters' challenges a bit too tidy. Like there is, and I guess in this way, there we don't see it, so it doesn't rely on exposition in this way. But we never see Lee and Angela have like a conversation about infidelity, or betrayal or anything like that. It's like, oh, they're back together. So I kind of would have liked some more dialogue there, so it's seen more of a conversation. Same with Min and Chris. Like I would have seen like it kind of is just like, oh, Chris figures this shit out and he's like now there. So, but yeah, but like I said, it's when it works, and it's so lovely to see a queer family, a chosen family, all come together to support and love each other. It feels so radical, and in this period, in this world we're living in with so much cruelty and bigotry and hatred and oppression, it just feels even more radical. And it just feels like this film feels like a bomb, like a salve. And it just was a really lovely experience. So, yeah, it's great. And it's in theaters Friday, April 18th. Okay. And for our third and final film, we're going to be talking about Sinners, the new horror film written and directed by Ryan Coogler. It stars Michael B. Jordan in a dual role, Miles Caton, Haley Steinfeld, Wunmi Mosaku, Jamie Lawson, Omar Benson Miller, Jack O'Connell, and Delroy Lindo, the always great Delroy Lindo. Here's the synopsis from the press release. Trying to leave their troubled lives behind, twin brothers, played by Michael B. Jordan, return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. So this is set in Clarksdale, Mississippi in the 1930s. Smoke and Stack, yes, Smokestack, are twin brothers who are World War I veterans, and they've returned from Chicago with a lot of, I'm pretty sure, stolen cash to their hometown to open up a juke joint. And they have bought an old mill from this white dude, and they're going to open it up. And so they need to get it ready. They want to open this evening. So they need everything to come together rather quickly. and they enlist their cousin, 19-year-old Sammy, aka Preacher Boy, due to his father, Smoke and Stack's uncle, being a preacher, and he's a sharecropper. He's also an incredibly talented blues singer and guitarist, and they want him to headline the new juke joint. And then they're making the rounds in the town, and one of those rounds is to Annie, who is a hoodoo spiritual leader and healer in the community. She's also Smoke's ex. She ends up cooking and is the bartender for the juke joint. But Annie and Smoke's reunion is really sweet. They had to face this horrific tragedy with the death of their baby that they talk about briefly. Then they also run into Mary, who is a biracial woman and a friend of the family, who's also Stack's ex. And then we have Pearline, who Sammy runs into, and then she ends up coming to the juke joint later that night. And she's a married woman, but Sammy's enamored with her. The bouncer of the juke joint is Cornbread. He's also a sharecropper, and they enlist his help. Smoke and Stack also enlist Grace and her husband Bo. They're Chinese-American grocery store owners, and Grace creates the sign for the bar, and they also provide food. And Grace also is also working as a bartender there. And then they also enlist Delta Slim, played by Delroy Lindo, who's a blues musician who plays at the juke joint. And so a lot of the film is them trying to go around the town and reconnect with people and get them to work for them at this juke joint, and kind of all of the preparations needed to get the place going. But in the very beginning of the film opens with this voiceover talking about music and how certain musicians have the ability, this kind of supernatural ability to conjure spirits. And that comes into play again later in the film. So it ends up turning into a vampire film because we see a man who arrives at the doorstep of two KKK members, and because we can see their white robes behind them, and he turns them into vampires too. And then he's drawn to the music that Sammy is playing, and so they head to the juke joint. And the film's voiceover talks about this again, and there's this really surreal scene in the film where Sammy is playing, and as the night is going on and the club is, in full swing, but he's playing and he's joined by other musicians from other time periods, past and present. Like we see African drummers, we see hip hop artists, we see heavy metal musicians, and they're all kind of coalescing here at this moment in time. And that attracts the attention of the head vampire, who's played by Jack O'Connell. And yeah, so then at that point, there are people as when they leave the juke joint, for instance, Cornbread, actually before that, Mary leaves the juke joint because the vampire and the two other white people show up, and they want to come into the juke joint. And everybody's like, no, this place is not for you, because this is a place this was created by Black people. It's for Black people. The reason Mary is there, because she's played by Haley Steinfeld, is partly because she's family, but she's also biracial. But this is not a space for white people. And so they tell them no, and they're like, but we can play music too. And they play this kind of folk song, and they're like, no. So Mary says that she's going to go out, and she's like, I'm going to make sure they really left and see what their intentions are. And when she comes back, Cornbread is there as the bouncer, of course, and she's like, "Well, are you going to let me in?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, of course." And it's very clear because if you've seen other vampire movies, if you know vampire lore, I mean, it changes depending on the book and the movie, but that is one of the tenets is a vampire, in order to come into someone's home and have their powers, they have to be invited in. And this comes up again and again. Whereas when Cornbread has to go to the bathroom and he has Delroy Lindo take his place, he has to leave. And then when he comes back, he's like, "Oh, aren't you going to invite me in?" And they're like, "Well, why don't you just come in?" And so it becomes a point. But yeah, so people keep coming in. And then Mary has come back, and she has bitten she's bitten Stack, and then that's when all hell breaks loose. And so people are horrified, of course, and they leave. And then you have the core group of the cast members who are basically trying to stand their ground and hold things off from the growing number of vampires that are swarming outside the doors. And so in many ways, this feels like From Dusk Till Dawn. It also, in ways, feels kind of like a reverse From Dusk Till Dawn because they're trying to get in. But in the sense of a lively bar having vampires, and then much like From Dusk Till Dawn, Sinners also starts off as kind of one film and then shifts and becomes another type of film in its genre, telling. And so, yeah, so then they have to fight off the vampires, and like they have debates as to whether they should, just stay there, because some of them are like, "No, let's just stay here. We just have to wait until morning." And a lot of this is advised by Annie because she's a hoodoo healer. She's the one who knows a lot of the lore about vampires. She initially thinks they're a different kind of spirit, like different kind of creature, but then she realizes they're vampires, and then they also are unsure if everybody inside is not a vampire. So they eat garlic to make sure that they are all indeed not vampires. And yeah, so you have these like tense moments of who's not a vampire, who is. And then you have these moments of intensity where they're fighting off the vampires because Grace's husband is outside, and so she wants to let the vampires in. She's had enough, and so then they end up fighting them. And yeah, it ends up being this really bloody battle. And yeah, and so eventually, as this is going on, because they're waiting for sunrise to happen, and the head vampire wants Sammy. He wants to turn Sammy because he wants to be able to have access to, because it's interesting. It's like the vampires all have this like collective. It's like this collective consciousness where they have the memories and thoughts of all the other vampires. So the head vampire, he wants to be able to have access to that, but also to the past and to the future in the way that Sammy's music can conjure and connect everyone. But yeah, so, and of course there's a standoff between Smoke and Stack. And yeah, so, and then there's this really, really striking moment where you see Smoke and Sammy kind of clutching each other in the water as they're watching the head vampire, and he's turning to flames, and a lot of the other vampires are too. And then it shifts to another film again because Smoke has learned that the guy who sold them the mill is a KKK member and was going to get all of the clan to come and kill the two of them. And so he hides out and has a sniper rifle and takes out all of the KKK members. So it's great to see lots of white supremacists die. And yeah, but he ends up getting shot in the process. And then Sammy goes on to live an extremely long life. Well, first he goes back home and to after this ordeal, he goes back home and he's bloody and he's got claw marks from the vampire on his face and he hugs his father. And that's actually how the film opens. It opens where, like, it's very clear Sammy has survived this brutal war, but you don't know exactly what happened. And then we flash back, and the whole thing is unfolding over this one night and one day and one night. And then so he goes back home, and his father tells him to give up the guitar because it's sinful, and he can't do it. And so he goes on to live a very long life. We then flash forward to see him in, I believe, his 90s. And he's a very famous blues guitarist. And then there is a surprise. Stack didn't die, and neither did Mary. And they're wearing modern clothes, and they're there. And Stack said that his brother couldn't kill him after all, and that he swore to stay away from Sammy. And the two of them just want to hear Sammy play a song one more time. And he also offers to take away Sammy's pain and death. And Sammy's like, no, I've lived long enough. I'm good. But yeah, so this is an extremely intense, visceral, captivating film that's encased in this really moody atmosphere. It's exciting to see such a striking film, a Southern Gothic horror film that is exploring racism and Jim Crow laws and the pernicious cruelty of white supremacy and the KKK. Yet it simultaneously revels in and celebrates Black joy and the transformative power of music and of, coming together and community. The cast is great. I love this cast. I think the acting is really great. I particularly love Unmi Mosaku. She is so great in everything, but she's particularly great in the horror film. Is it His Home? His House? Yeah, it's so good. And Jamie Lawson has kind of a smaller role here, but she's really, really exceptional in the film Farewell Amore. And of course, Delroy Lindo is outstanding and has this scene where he like sacrifices himself, where he like takes a razor and cuts his arm and it's like squirting blood everywhere so he can attract the vampires so the others can get away inside the juke joint. And yeah, which is sad because I'm like, I don't want you to die, Delroy Lindo. You're great. But yeah, this is also a really excellently crafted film with gorgeous, stunning cinematography by Autumn Durald Arkapaw, who also did the cinematography for The Last Showgirl and for Wakanda Forever. I saw this in IMAX, and it changes aspect ratios between 276:1, which is Ultra Panavision format, and 143:1, which Ryan Coogler said is the reason that there are moments where that changes is so the film can be even more immersive. And it is extremely stunning, striking cinematography. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous film. The music is fantastic. It's electrifying and hypnotic. The blues music is great, but also the score by Ludwig Göransson, who also did Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and Oppenheimer. Really great score. While it's a supernatural horror film, it's a film rooted in history. All art is political, and horror in particular is a very political, overtly political genre. And Sinners is no exception. It really has Ryan Coogler's vision and his ability to merge history with genre and these cultural touchstones. And yeah, I think this was such a striking film. It was so good. I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was, yeah, really, really an excellent film. And I kind of can't wait to see it again. It was just, I was really, I don't want to say blown away by it because I thought it was going to be good because it sounded good, but it really, really was just so good. Um, yeah, a fantastic film. So let me do a quick recap. I actually would recommend all three films this week. All three films are in theaters. I would recommend The Ugly Stepsister, although it is really gory, and I know not everyone can handle really intense gore. But yeah, and The Wedding Banquet is a very sweet film. That's great. And Sinners was excellent. I really enjoyed it, and it feels very epic in its scope, in its cinematography, and in its scope, what it's trying to do, and um, it's yeah. I really really liked that. I really liked this film a lot. Um, but yeah, so I want to get that's it. I want to give a huge thank you to our editor Otto Clamor. Otto, thank you so much for making us sound great week after week. You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. You can also find us at our website, spoilerpiece.com. You can find us on social media. We're at Spoiler Piece on Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Letterboxd. You can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call at 862-21-PIECE. Send us an email, send us a text message, send us a voicemail, whatever. Let us know on social media. Which of these films did you enjoy? Or if you haven't seen them, which are you most interested to see? And if you like the show, please consider rating and reviewing us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. That really helps us out a lot, gets the word out about the show. And if you like the show, consider joining our Patreon if you're not already. As I said at the top of the show, this week I talked about, because it was just me, we talked about Y2K and Dead Mail. And yeah, you get access to our catalog of bonus episodes, I believe over 300, and you get access to weekly bonus episodes, and you can also vote in monthly polls. So yeah, it's a fun time. And another way you can support the show, you can also purchase our merchandise at our TeePublic store, which you can find through our website. And yeah, we've got all kinds of merch. We've got t-shirts, hoodies, pillows, mugs, tote bags, magnets, all kinds of goods. And yeah, so you can show your love for hopefully one of your favorite movie podcasts. If not your favorite. We hope so anyway. And that's going to do it for me. Then my name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I'm also a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and a member of Gallica. You can follow me at Blue Sky and Twitter at Opinioness World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinioness. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.